Okay. What could be the realizations of an ever-present mind? What is the purpose of an image of life in a changing world? Welcome to this evening's talk. There has been a very profound notion in mysticism known as the self of selves. Pretty much people, human beings, wanted to uncover a comprehension of their ultimate self. Okay, that means the moment human beings could see the world was multidimensional, they began wondering if their self was multidimensional. Do you know that means similar to how the scientists, for example, saw atoms in the tree? So similarly, there were people like Carl Jung and many others who looked at the mind and looked at abstraction and wondered about memes and archetypes and the source of the abstract self as much as the visible self. Pretty much by being individuals, we've had an ability to perceive multidimensionality. In our multidimensional perception, it's like various memories of yourself are all running towards this present moment. It is a sort of access to a segmented presence, a separated presence of intelligence. There's a very nice quote from Shir Nisargadatta Maharaj. He says the riddle of spirituality cannot be solved by the intellect. At the most, your intellect can provide you with livelihood. Whatever you try to become, that is not you. Before the words come out, before you say, I am, that is you. You must be concerned with only yourself. Don't worry about anybody else. What are you? There has been a constant search from our ancestors to see where the clear world is. That means, believe it or not, before we developed language, it was all just one reality. There was no sophistication, no complexity, not even understanding. We were just standing under the stars without any sense of individualization. As evolution took place, the sense of individuality developed. The moment it developed in a sort of subjective way, the individual came to being. So now this subjective sense of self, and the reason I repeat this in a lot of these talks is because this is a very important point, that there was a sort of there was a spark of a subjective evolution. That means the mind came into more than formation. It became the one forming things. That's how profound our intelligence is. Our eyes opened and we were no longer just nature. We were in nature. We became separate from everything to be something. There's a quote from Papaji. He says, the happiness which is when there is no thought, the happiness you experience in the deep sleep state, the happiness which has no known source is your own true nature. But if you think you will suffer, so sleep in the day and keep quiet in the night. This means simply don't think. pretty much, there is a non-dual way of being here on this planet. The mystical mind acknowledged it. It acknowledged an inseparability prior to the separation. Right now, if I ask you, who are you, you're going to throw words at me. And these words are going to represent various ways your experience has come to life based on certain memories. Pretty much you can say based on like this premise, we think of it at least this way. I don't believe it's this way, but I feel the mainstream thinks it in this way, that pretty much the experiences you go through, everything you consider your past is your memory. And what is your memory? It is a present access. It's as if you're in this moment, but suddenly a moment from 10 years ago visits your attention. And there have been moments where I have noticed this in both in others and in myself, where people have been speaking to me and my attention was somewhere else, even though my ears were listening to them. It's as if my ears were politer than my mind to that person. But my mind, it can be, you can experience many ways of of being here, and you constantly are. That's pretty much why evolution has a value. It is constant movement into the ultimate change, into the ultimate change. And sometimes in these mystical teachings that I kind of see online, you know what it comes down to? It comes down to the dude being so simple that he stops suffering in a complex way, and in his simplicity, he gets to see what is actually here. What is the life that is here? Sometimes our problems are not because we have not found the proper complex solution. It is because we have kept the problem more complex than we can find a solution. That means it's your mind has an incredible ability to make a pebble into a mountain instantly, not objectively. You can't go look at a pebble and be like, "Be a mountain," like and the pebble suddenly turns into a mountain. We don't live in that kind of world. But your mind can use a microscope or something and begin to see a world in the smallest world you know, and which means in an infinite multiplicity is at work in regards to how our perception is being us. That means this is a very interesting time. We are all alive, but we don't realize it. We're still trying to honor our ancestors in a way that we forget why we were born. That is the issue with the world. You try to fit in, you're asking the past to accept your new intelligence. It either will or it won't. Karma, you know what karma is? Karma is how the world treats you. And usually, how the world treats you comes from how you have treated yourself or the idea of yourself. The idea of yourself dictates the laws of the world. This is why self-inquiry is so important. This is why the humanity has always and will continue to forever question the unknown and question ways that unknown intelligence is present. It's as if, like, honestly, there's I, I I don't remember exactly what they call it. I think it's the cosmological argument, and it has to do with design. Because primarily, before I speak to you guys online, or before I speak in general, I consider myself a designer and then a communicator of the design. So what that means is, I feel like the mind truly blooms when it first puts away what it is. So first you feel like there's more truth, and you kind of become like that new age kind of seeker, that dude who thinks he has to go to India to become enlightened. And you go to India and you see it's not about you trying to get some truth that's waiting for you. It's like it's kind of weird to promise people heaven, because it is their eyes that is doing most of the work. This is why I believe there never were teachers, there were only good students. Never was there a teacher, because the teacher doesn't know what the student needs to learn in that moment in his life. The teacher just speaks. It's the student's context. It's the student's mind. I remember, like, I was don't think like I was the best role model of a student, for example. I would be in class, the teacher would say something, I would just wonder in that moment, okay, what's the design this person's speaking about? Like, what is the design that my mind generates as these words enter my ears? And eventually I came to realize that you have to wield your own intelligence in a world that's constantly trying to shape your intellect. That means right now, if you were curious about something, you would use some method. Now, what Mr. Within is saying is that pretty much you would probably use the best method out there. The reason a lot of us are on YouTube is because we're data seekers. We're, we're trying to find the data that would free us all. Kind of like Lord of the Rings kind of show, the one ring to rule them all. We're trying to find the one truth that's going to rule them all. And I find that in the sacrifice of a singular truth, many dimensions will go unnoticed. That means if you just believe in the ideas you have now, you are kind of not allowing yourself to get new ideas. That's the issue with believing something too solidly. My fundamental view was you know what happened? I was about to fall into a sort of egoic arrogance until my problems actually somehow took me within before they took me without. That means before I wanted to fight back with a rage at the world that had, in some sense, resisted, like, but in a crazy, not like in a egoic way, in a way where I still hadn't understood what the word wisdom meant. I was still too busy trying to uh, dominate for my success, and that was blindness in a world where everybody needs to pretty much get to the final stage. So for me, I stopped when the idea of my past self died. That's when I realized the present was eternal. And you always get it, enlightenment is not something you gotta, like, I personally consider enlightenment is not something that you pretty much have to like go to another country. That's really like the dude really doesn't know what to do, but in actuality it's like this picture I saw, this kind of like somebody had made drawn this picture on Facebook, like it was on a Facebook post where it showed this guy who was like a busy CEO or something. He suddenly decides to go to India, grows a long beard, holds a stick, dresses the part, and he goes to the cave of the yogi. He goes to see that enlightened yogi in India. Like the dude's become super conscious and awake. So this dude goes and he suddenly sees in the cave, instead of there being a super yogi, it's himself with the suit. And he begins to realize that it was never about you having to change external conditions to change your inner reality. It was about a recognition of how the inner reality keeps the external to a point where, as this attention is cultivated, there will no longer be inner external, and this is not some super deep state. It's an instant recognition of the moment. It's an instant recognition of the moment, similar to, if you have, I personally have memories before I learned language where I was awake and I was conscious. That means my mind was watching reality before I could contain that reality in a subjective sort of in a suit. Because trust me, like, what are these sentences that I'm saying to you? They are sort of masks of how your mind, how deeply it can envision. For me, it's like, I just want to see the peak of intelligence, and the peak of an intelligence that chooses to be universally responsible. I feel that is there's no greater catalyst, there's no greater acceleration of a species into its greater evolution. Because let me tell you, the moment we became tribal entities, like it was just clarified, there was a sort of karmic echo. So what that means is, pretty much, guys, this is going to be too, I'm saying this too early, but I think probably in the next 1,000 years, our species is going to have efforts made, either internally, either based on us or based on nature. Either technology or nature will get to it first. And so what it is that, in some sense, we will all become one collective being. That means right now, everybody is on Facebook. Everybody is, in some sense, obsessed with data. Even me, as I'm speaking right now, I have found data to be the most valuable thing to share. That means for me, a good idea has a value that no economical power, no financial power can have, because it has to do with the mind's advancement. You see, when you get wealth, incredible amounts of wealth, this is why I kind of hear out um, the movement of the underdog, of those people in our societies who are breaking. It's very savage, guys. It's very savage. Just like how I remember, I'll be honest, like I remember I was smoking a cigarette and this chaotic thought came that just like how the cigarette turned into ash, I was going towards a sort of ending where I would turn into ash, you know. And so the spirit of the phoenix is inspiring, yet it we have to kind of look at this situation. We have to look at life and we have to recognize, okay, shitload of waves of data have hit you since your childhood. I don't believe anybody can have beliefs. Right now, you could be in front of me and say, I believe in this. And then tomorrow, I will come and ask you, and you could say the same thing, your same belief, but I will ask you, are you the same you? And could that be the same belief or not? Because we've had many ancient Greek philosophers who I was just slow hand clapping from like thousands of years after their like from like a couple thousand years after their existence. I'm slow hand clapping for their efforts, because Heraclitus, this Greek philosopher, he said, no man steps in the same river twice, and it is not the same man, and it is not the same river. It is not the same river, and it is not the same man. That means every moment commands an abidance by the law of novelty. Change will open your eyes regardless of how you keep them closed. That's the good thing. This is why some yogis, playfully, they say that everybody's going to get enlightened. You know, now I am kind of understanding this thing. I kind of noticed this as a kid when I would see drops of water on a window, like a car window, kind of merging. And that was a very unique concept for me because it was like many people becoming one thing. And when we look at our business structures or organizations, many people's actions are finding a unified manifestation, which becomes that company and the community of the company and its personality and whatnot. You see, any institution survives as much as it remains honest to itself, but honest to its world. Any institution, it doesn't matter how powerful, how non-powerful, any institution that is not honest, is the issue is that uh, you're choosing to be part of, you're choosing to walk destructively. That's the issue. I've talked to people who it was as if I talked to it's like you woke up a giant you shouldn't have. The person was so angry that the moment you talked to them, their anger was like being like a harpoon directed at you. And it's like that moment you, like Yoda, tried to like calm down, man, calm down. Papaji has this quote where he says, thoughts are impediments to seeing your own face. Don't give rise to any thought and discover who you are. So let's just take this enlightened guy's advice and let's see how we can apply it. He's saying, don't give rise to any thought. So you notice anytime you try not to think, that's an action of thinking. So it's a trick kind of instruction where you have to realize it is kind of how Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching said it. He said action through inaction. So I'm telling you, you right now are under the impression that you got to do more stuff to be able to see more stuff. You're under the impression now that you incredibly need the proper data or you won't survive, right? And even though that seems to be the case, we cannot stop civilization from what it's doing. But in some sense, what Mr. Within is saying is that you get access to your own data. So think of it this way. Since your childhood, your mind's been a recording instrument. You've been this unique instrument of biological profoundness, and you've been just absorbing, let's say, you're getting, accumulating, constantly generating memories, pretty much sequencing thoughts based on a linear time. That means if you want to improve somebody's memory, you gotta have them kind of hold on to linear time, as much as they can. So you gotta constantly challenge them and say, what time is it? What time is it? What time is it? right? It is a kind of snapping out the mind that has chosen to walk further away from its consciousness. So you see, I'm getting excited. As you do nothing, imagine you went to the most enlightened guru ever, the most super duper guru in the world, okay, enlightened being, and you know, you went to the most enlightened being, and the enlightened being looked at you and he said, "Are you ready for my ultimate teaching?" And all the people were like, "Yeah, tell us your ultimate teaching, enlightened person." And the enlightened person said, "My ultimate teaching is do nothing and watch." That's it. This watcher, this simple instant watcher, is the generator of the context of your freedom. Your attention is being stuff and thought. It's an instant. Because if truth, like it's guys, like let's think about it. How can I get to truth? How can I find truth? And you begin to wonder, okay, let's see the final stage. Let's wonder if when somebody finds truth, what would it look like? You would see whatever it is, if you are seeking it, the moment you find it would be an experience of now. So any truth you seek is now. And these, like, we are living in a linguistic simulation that has, in some sense, given so much depth and color to matter. You know, there's a sort of color to matter, which is the actual color. Like right now, outside my window, I'm seeing the leaves of a green tree, you know, green leaves of a tree. And so what I'm seeing is sight, but there's also another sense of color, which is the thought that arises by the sensory perception. So you are a mechanism, this sort of evolutionary intelligence that translates objective phenomena into subjective being. Do you see? We are fascinating creatures, and we're doing things that when you look at other species on this animal, like on this planet, like if all the other animals on this planet could speak, they'd all be like freaked out, be like, "What the fuck is this human being?" It's as if we are like the aliens to lesser life forms, you know? And it's very profound because in some schools of mystical thought, their God and man were inseparable, as if in for example Michelangelo's view, as he drew on the Sistine Chapel, like the what is it, like the finger of man and God separated by an inch, right? So it's like it's this very profound painting on in the Sistine Chapel, and pretty much it was like Michelangelo saw man and God separate, okay? But in certain cultures, they saw man and God inseparable. In ancient Vedic traditions, like, do you know what I mean? I find that we should not, you can't just judge a person by how your mind sees them. That's the thing. That means regardless of how much we become certain, we're all in a rock in space. So guys, it's like this. I was a kid that was just like really passively just listening to the instructions of my environment until I asked, until my mind wondered, okay, all these people in front of me who seem to have entered this life earlier, where are they getting their wisdom? How are they seeing the world? And I realized we are in a rock in empty space. Just think about that. And on this rock, we spoke, and language came into meaning. Language is how thought moves or gets dynamism. A story is many words in one moment. I yeah, yeah. Let's move on. Let's move on. By the way, guys, any honest, actual questions about consciousness, I'm open to answering. By the way, just let me. Nisargadatta Maharaj. And okay, so this quote is from Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj. By the way, I'm sharing this in the light of an advanced communicator. I consider each human being to be an advanced communication of the universal sector. So I feel our minds exist to communicate. So let's max it out and see how far it goes. You know, and it's kind of like your mind is this incredible car's engine, and you're just waiting to try it. You're just waiting to drive this new technology. So right now, Mr. Within is saying you are a technology. Okay, you're a technology of nature. Mainly, a lot of your processes of your body, how your body naturally heals itself and recovers, or how your heartbeat occurs, your breathing. These are the beautiful ways that nature is just happening. And sometimes chaos and misery and stress and depression occur because of the person's worldview. Anyways, let me just read these quotes from Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, and then I'll kind of dive into this a bit more. He says, once you subside into the consciousness, the factual state of reality shall be revealed to you, with the knowledge that will emanate out of you intuitively, like spring water. This will enable you to discern not what is real and unreal, but most importantly, to realize what I am and who could be that one. Surely not an individual who's trapped in the mind shell, but that one is the knowledge. I am the consciousness. So what he's saying here, right now, who you think you are and how you have knowledge is it's not that pure knowing of the I amness of consciousness. You can always tell, you can always know the edges of your attention, you know. And when your attention becomes single pointed, that's when the internal reality suddenly becomes visible. You become a sort of watcher within your thoughts and how all those thoughts are being the soul of matter, pretty much. Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj has another quote where he says, the eternal absolute state of mind prior to the beingness, when the message I am was not, is supremely significant. Okay, what did I just read? The eternal absolute state of mind prior to the beingness, when the message I am was not, is supremely significant. Who would have witnessed the message I am if my priormost state of the non-beingness was not? Yeah. So he's pretty much saying, like, you need a ground in order for the building to exist. Okay, so suddenly when you see the ground doesn't exist, the building doesn't exist. And this is similar to how there is this sort of a metamorphosis beyond just an egoic entity. An egoic entity is pretty much a creature of thought. A creature of thought is a creature that is worshiping thoughts. And as thoughts are worshipped, eventually they harden into beliefs. They solidify into beliefs. Do you see? And these beliefs become patterns and filters of your decision making. So it's kind of one of those things where how you should be as a person in modern society is similar to those martial art masters, like in the movies, like those Jet Li movies, or that Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, or the Hidden Dragon, or the Hero movie. Like in these movies, you see a state of mastery where the person has an incredible awareness of their own ability, and it's as if it's that person who has reached the peak of strength where he no longer needs to display the strength. The strength remains dormant as an incredible alertness, and that incredible alertness remains as if the master who's walking peacefully in the yard or something. Suddenly, when he's embraced by ninjas, like as ninjas attack him in some sense, it becomes one of those situations where there's two options: either you brutally kill these people, or your state of mind, your attention becomes the instant communicator of your feet, of your how can I say it? Oh my god! It's like nature fights in you as you. Okay, so it's as if it's a rhythm, it's a balance. It's kind of like how in Star Wars there was this really cool idea where the person would see if the force is strong in this one. I constantly thought, what is this force these guys are talking about? And eventually I realized it is the will of destiny. That's how powerful the force is. This is why the fucking Jedi's, excuse my language, the Jedi's say, for example, they say, like, have faith, Luke, or something. I don't know. But the idea is really this: that there is, in the embrace state of mind, you will experience various waves that hit you, and so then as you remember your intuition. I never say like a person has intuition. It's intuition is kind of like the world's way of kind of reminding you who you are again. You see, it doesn't have to do per se with a certain character or story. All these people believing in guardian angels, like that's lovely, but at the same time, it doesn't. The image is not important. It is the movement of the moment. It is the great happening that one suddenly finds themselves a part of. So I'm pretty much telling our whole species, especially to all those people. There's so many people. I saw a documentary on this, and I was like, wow. There's so many people stressed and depressed in this world, and what that sign is, what that is a sign of, what that is a sign of is a sign of the failure of civilization. When people don't want to exist anymore, when there's a sort of suicide rate at all, that means there has been the failure of intelligence to find a better way. That means society is not making it easy for people. And you see, back in the day, they had such, and especially in Renaissance times, I believe the Medici family was involved in kind of redesigning society. They were like a wealthy family class in Italy during the Renaissance times or something. And so they would begin creating societies and the streets of society in an incredible way. Okay, like like they saw that beauty was the incredible freedom that is allowed to the being's mind. Do you see? Imagine a city where you walk and everything is beautiful. It is not beautiful per se by just comparison or reference, because then beauty becomes subjective, but it is beautiful in the sense of the efficiency, you know efficiency is the ultimate beauty for a civilization, the ultimate beautiful vision for a civilization. You cannot ask anything else. Live an efficient life and forget every other story. Just experience it as you live it. Understand it took 4 billion years. Like, just think about it. 4 billion years to be able to be here as a species. And people who don't care, like, this is why it's so messed up, because our economy, the issue is not the businesses, or like the way the issue is the culture. The How can I tell you, it is the lack of activation of the creative side of people's minds throughout the day. The lack of that is irritating. It's irritating when you can see efficiency but not have it happen. Do you know what I mean? So it's one of those things where I think the greatest skill one can achieve is learning to recognize opportunity quick and instantly respond to it. I feel that there's no greater action than clarity. We need clarity more than we need food or water, because if we could imagine we endlessly had food or water at the end of our life, we would be like, we still have questions, you know? And this happened to Socrates, the great Socrates, where he was in some sense sentenced in an unjust way. You know, he was thought to kind of be spreading his own spiritual propaganda, and that's how the court saw it, as propaganda, you know, to the youth of Athens. So he was sharing views on the soul and spirit and gods back in the day in ancient Greece, that it was like some people found out and like they started a beef with him or something, you know, like just like how some rappers do, you know, Socrates. How would I say it? It's like Socrates was given poison, he was sentenced, and he looked at all those people as he was about to drink the poison, and he was pretty much speaking his last mortal thing. And the way, I'll tell you the details of how the poison was, it was, I don't remember the chemical exactly, but it was this sort of chemical that would suddenly make his body, suddenly from the feet towards the head, suddenly go inactive. So it was like this kind of slow death, kind of strange poison. And Socrates, as he was giving like he I don't exactly know the exact dialogue, but I remember reading like a certain a passage that was saying that Socrates, as he was passing and he looked at all those people there, you know, he said something like, "I don't fear death because I am going to a place where either like I will there will be nothing and I will see the truth. I will in some sense be at the final destination." And he said either all the questions I've answered in my mind will be answered. He felt as if like he had reached a level of state of mind where he no longer had problems. The only problem that was left was his mortality. And then he came to this conclusion through his depth of his own consciousness, because he had a very profound relationship, Socrates, with his intuition. He called it the inner oracle. It would kind of tell him what will happen before it would happen. He was a very profound figure internally. And Socrates says, "I will be in a place where all my questions will be answered." He is fearlessly entering a state where he knows that he can no longer hold on to space and time in the same way. So you become a person where, I will say it, it's kind of strange, but pretty much you learn to dissolve in the light of the next world. Okay? You learn to no longer be a thought, and you experience higher domains of experience, higher domains of existential phenomena, you know, regardless of your preference in this life. It's like, I'll tell you something hilarious. This is what I mean by the mind continuing after death. In some sense, the businessman dies and goes to heaven, you know, and there's a person at the gate, and the businessman is like, no, sorry, the businessman's like, can I get into heaven? And the guard's like, nah, man, you can't. And the guy's like, what should I do? And he said, like, you just stand here. And so the guy's like, what does that mean? Am I going in heaven or not? He's like, just stand here, you know? And the guy suddenly, he was this merchant salesman. So he goes to the guard and he's like, listen, man, you know, I was a good guy. And I think I got a lot of property in this kingdom of heaven, okay? So, like, you know, I'll give you something, you know, just let me in, you know, I'll make life happen, man. And it's in that moment where, you know, the guard looks at him and he's like, you can't enter, you know, because you see a reality where you can't enter. Not because the outer is justifying your mind. That your free will is the suggestion that till the end of your life there's a you inside your eyes. So what I'm trying to get to is this notion that once we wonder about the world, so let's say scientists are starting from the world, let's start from there. Let's say a scientist does experiments and begins to see, okay, so what's the condition? It's this endless material world where our laws have nowhere else to go, our scientific laws have nowhere else to go but just becoming complex. Science is kind of like YouTube views, they never decrease. Do you see? So suddenly it's more added on, and it becomes one of these things where after you have reached the inevitable edges or the unknown edges of your external knowledge, that's when it becomes interesting to know what is moving behind your eyes and your true search for it, not in a kind of reward based way. Never do anything for a reward. Do things because you feel it is right or wrong, and your feeling is justified by your not only intuitive clarity but sharpness of direct perception of the situation. That means I was a kid. I'll tell you this. When I was like, and I felt like, what is this? This guy's getting paid to give us paper, like. So I felt it wasn't serious, right? So I didn't take it seriously, even though I had a very high mark. But I'm telling you, the thing was, it was one of those situations. Man, how can I relate it? Where I used to seek other people's data because I felt I didn't know. I felt others knew more, so I was looking at them and not at myself. Eventually, as I went into nature in a sort of strange intuitive solitude, in that strange intuitive solitude, my conscious sense of being shifted when I acknowledged the unconscious for the first time. When I acknowledged the unconscious, there was a sort of bliss. There was suddenly like tears came out of my eyes because I was no longer a thought. I was no longer just my emotions. I experienced why matter is here. I experienced why matter matters. And in that moment I remember it was like the question who's looking through my eyes became the presence of the moment. It was no longer a search. I could not search for truth outside of myself. It was not there. Do you see? There's this poet named Jalaluddin Maulana Rumi. He says, I lived on the edge of insanity, on the lip of insanity, wanting to know reasons, knocking on a door. The door opened. I was knocking from the inside. That means his greatest questions, suddenly their answers were no longer outside of himself. He found the ability, the ability to realize you're able, and to realize that it's kind of like just every person I think should have this mentality that you are a commander of efficiency for your species, but not an efficiency that is cruel, you know? Because our efficiency will require to expanding the species tolerance and listening ability. As we increase the listening ability, there will be more integration of real views. You see, so media is like strangely the tool that built our chains, but the tool that we will also use to break those chains. Do you see? That is the entertainment industry's destiny, I think. It will eventually recognize nothing sells better than the actual true knowledge of this world being shared to people. There's too many efforts to escape the world. Belief systems are efforts to escape the moment. You can't confront it, stuff's getting too intense, so you're like, okay, I believe something, like, you know and this is why there's an honorable way of entertaining the idea of spirituality, and there's a dishonorable way. you know, those people who they believe they're a soul, you know, they're like, I believe I'm a soul now. I don't know if the soul's there, but who cares, you know? Like all those people will find a sort of, you got to be honorable with the language your mind holds, or you will have ideas which you won't be able to communicate. Do you see? There's a sort of, just like how the lion in nature has to kill the prey on its own, it doesn't just eat leftover food. Similarly, you won't believe anything unless it's your true generation, unless you roar somehow from behind your eyes. Shri Maharaj says, the primary miracle is that I experience the I am and the world. Prior to this experiencing, I abided in myself, in my eternal absolute state. Without my beingness, that is, without the message, I am, my eternal absolute state only prevails. That means this dude pretty much went to the edge of his thoughts, which is the edge of his sense of self. And he came to actually be able to confront the moment and to recognize that the mind is constantly masking everything subjectively. That's like, you try this. If you just pay attention to one object, trust me, you just look at it and do nothing, and you will see how your mind will generate various ways you will view that object. It's like there's a part of us that is endlessly expanding, and there's a part of us that is resisting this expansion. And this is why experience comes across as temporary. I know that many scientists, in some sense, are seeking a model for consciousness, and that's a very honorable thing. Any human being, I don't care who it is. It could be the worst person in the worst. It could be the most unfortunate to the most fortunate. It doesn't matter who it is. Okay, it doesn't matter uh, where you are or what you are. What matters is how much you actually care for us as a species to figure out what we are and why all this is here. The inspiration for the world is lost. This is like how the ancients, many wise souls, as they were dying early before the wars began, they were just leaving their bodies before war began. You know, in ancient stories, you find this. These sort of sages kind of looked at the world and they're like, the mistakes of man are being their own show, you know? And may wisdom return, but they left. They were pretty much gods that were like, okay, it's getting too crowded here, I'm leaving, you know. And also have this notion with you that you don't know enough to even judge your intelligence, but it's worth studying it. Not just studying books, not just studying videos or words and language and da 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 da. Like you study what is real for you. Study what is real. If you read something and it's not real for you, then you don't have to. You don't have to just buy into it. You know, you have enough of an ability to uh, shatter ignorance. You know. Papaji says, all that you're attached to, all that you love, all that you know, someday will be gone. Knowing this, and that the world is your mind which you create, play in, and suffer from, is known as discrimination. Discriminate between the real and the unreal. The known is unreal and will come and go, so stay with the unknown, the unchanging truth. All which appears and disappears is not real, and no nectar will come from it. So don't cling to it, and once you let go, do not turn back to it. Stay as eternity in your own being. the words of Papaji, this enlightened uh, mystic. It's very fascinating. It's kind of like we have some people on the planet saying we should worship data. We have some people on the planet using data to make warships. And we have some people on this planet who are saying that it's all an illusion because the temporary cannot lead to an eternal result. You see, they're seeing that it's as if you gotta put aside the violence because there's better things you can do with your time, more incredible things where your experience advances. It's like we're at that point of evolution where the next phases of our evolution as human beings, it's no longer just nature alone. Now it has to do with our consciousness. It has to do with how we are a shape in the moment and how we constantly get shaped and how the world revolves into where our attention. Who are you? Imagine again, and you'll constantly see that who you are is none of the thoughts you have. It is none of the thoughts you generate. It is the generator itself. It is the whole moment. This whole moment is so profound that in some sense, many inner rebels, many mystical rebels, back in the day, these were people who they tried to infiltrate the mind of society with mirrors. They just gave mirrors. They had no violent rebellion. They're like, okay, look at yourself, ask yourself who you are, and then really think for yourself. It was like that was the inner mystical rebellion. That was a sort of movement in our species where human beings saw that truth must be protected because truth is the natural state. That means we have become dangerous to our own natural ways of being as human beings. And that's when we should all be hearing, even though we see, like, everything being peaceful and stuff, at the same time, we should be hearing the alarms going off in the distance. The alarms for a sort of need for the species to reorganize, to realign, to recognize, to first have this command. This is not a movement, an institution. This is just human beings being like, holy shit, okay, what if we do this? Just a second, guys. I'm looking for something. Okay. Pretty much human beings, let's say, in this modern vision of this playful modern vision of a future society, will be requested in some sense. These are ideas, to be honest, I've kind of shared in my science fiction novel. I'm writing a very interesting science fiction novel called The Messenger of Giants. And so in this book, I'm kind of like sharing a lot of my deep views on how society could be or other ways societies have been or are being currently. You know, there comes a sort of first initial understanding of your intelligence. That means every person must, excuse me. Oh my God, how attention moves. Okay. Uh, Imagine everybody's an advanced communicator. Communication becomes important. Communication becomes the bridge between many of our inner realities. As many of our inner realities integrate, as they integrate, we begin creating new worlds. We begin creating hybrid worlds. As these hybridized worlds begins to exist, in some sense, many people will begin having similar inspirations, similar interests. Many people will begin defining themselves as aspects of the social mind. And what that means is if you could see a society and think that's like a brain, some members in that society are being like the frontal lobe, some members are being the other parts, you know, you know, and members are being even the amygdala. You know? So there's many different ways that a society behaves that's similar to how our brains function. And of course, this is an abstract way of connecting dots, but what I'm trying to get your attention to is that um, what will happen is that our communication will evolve us into creatures that will suddenly become evolutionary wise the silence. We will have explored enough and experienced enough of this lifetime that we will suddenly see reality also present in silence and stillness. That's when the typical way of seeing success and failure cracks down, and that whole paradigm of way of looking at it kind of breaks away and gets dismantled. So we stop seeking success, we stop running away from failure. You know, we stop having our emotions generating our experience based on that model, right? And so the model changes into one of those things where it's as if we become 8 billion. Imagine it was like on a planet there's 8 billion geniuses, yet they do not know they're all geniuses because they have never tried. That's the issue. You know, you're like an instrument and you gotta hope that life's conditions take you to a moment where you see your true melody, your true potential. Okay, your true potential has to arrive from an honesty, because honesty, like your memory works in waves. Okay, and what I mean by that is that internally, like the brain is generating waves. Your attention in the moment is an energetic phenomena. This energetic phenomena has an influence on the environment. The way it has an influence on the environment is that subjectively it makes you the god, but objectively you are the creator of the god, creation of the god. And so this relationship with our own sense of self has been the relationship echoed in much of language so far. You know, and as we as a species move beyond the language threshold, that's a very important moment in our history. That will be the moment where in some sense we will recognize that new domains of knowledge are to be explored, simply because language, it's as if we have to create the next great languages, and it will eventually evolve to geometry. So just like how, let's say, we evolved from a lesser form to this current form, our languages are going to evolve into a geometric way of being. I call it the geometrical evolution of language. Okay, this is how I've conceived and I've written about this. But in some sense, what I'm trying to tell you, it's an observation. It's a observation of the observer of the observation. Do you see? And it becomes an instant moment of like pure stillness and silence. Life no longer can translate into a physical story or a metaphysical story. The mind's attention is no longer bound to what it was exposed. You know. There's a quote I gotta read from, let me find it. There's, I'm going to read for you guys very interesting quotes from three incredible figures, poetic figures in just on this planet, three human beings who they had an incredibly unique vision. Um, Just a second, I gotta find it. The first quote is, actually, let me find all of them. So, okay, here. Let's, all right, guys, I'm going to read these three quotes, kind of speed through them. The first quote is from a person named Jalaluddin Maulana Rumi. He says, I died as a mineral and became a plant. I died as a plant and rose to animal. I died as an animal and I was man. Why should I fear? When was I less by dying? Yet once more I shall die as man, to soar with angels perish. All except God doth perish, or the ultimate self doth perish, you know. So this is Rumi. I believe he was alive like around 700 to 900 years ago. All these people I'm saying, these are profound Sufi mystic poets, you know. Dervish culture is not getting as much attention as it needs to, as many cultures are in the same dilemma. Hafiz tells us something incredible. He says, people say that the soul, on hearing the song of creation, entered the body, but in reality, the soul itself was the song. He's saying how many people feel a soul entered the body, but it's not that. It's that the body was part of the song of the soul. It was, in some sense, you feel your body is leading to your mind, okay? And it's important for it to be that way in order for you to be able to maintain the body. If you can't consider your body, you can't maintain it. You know, not everybody needs to go into caves and get out of like this state of being, you know? Sometimes suffering is that part of like the community that you need to, in some sense, reorganize. So eventually this integration of vision will make us ask the most ultimate question, which I feel will come down to this questions of what is the self of selves, or what is the soul of the soul of the soul, you know. Then we have Attar. And guys, this guy is like next level. You know, both Hafiz and Rumi, they kind of saw Attar as their older brother, you know, of wisdom, you know. And so what Attar said, it's at the end of one of his poems where he's taught. So I gotta give you a small backstory actually. So Attar has this kind of story, this mythical story of the phoenix. And the phoenix in Farsi, you would say Seymour, which means 30 birds. And so his writings, is the main one is called The Conference of the Birds. Okay, and it's this profound story that all the birds in the world kind of gathered together to find this ultimate bird that's the phoenix. They all flew, they all flew, they all flew. And eventually, as all the birds on the planet went to find this phoenix, many of them got tired, many of them were no longer motivated, and they stopped flying. Eventually, at the end of it, there were 30 left, and this 30 continued on so fast, so into the depth of reality, that this is the end of the poem where he's talking about what the 30 birds saw, okay, as they went to that core end. So he says, the 30 birds saw their selves had been restored to them once more, that after nothingness they had attained eternal life, and selfhood was regained. This nothingness, this life, are states no tongue. at any time has adequately sung. Those who can speak still wander far away from the dark truth they struggle to convey, and by analogies they try to show the forms men's partial knowledge cannot know. Language is unable to convey the truth. So pretty much it's like language is a technology and you're the user of the technology, and the technology does not define the user. The user can choose to define the technology as he uses it. Hence how language becomes of use to us as individuals on this planet. This self of selves will eventually be an acceptance of the moment. It will be a momentary experience. So to pay attention to the moment is valuable in a kind of world where not only is it just inevitably changing, but you're constantly being pulled towards different ways to change. You first, it's like in ancient Vedanta, they had a very interesting approach. They said you got to find your divine remembrance. That means you don't just do yoga out of nowhere. You're like, okay, yoga, let's do it. It's like you don't approach the enlightened path that way. You first find your divine remembrance. You remember beyond your subjectivity. Your own intuition first takes shape before the revelation can arrive. And as you establish yourself into that intuition, you begin finding your divine remembrance. Your divine remembrance is an eternal memory. It's a memory that has never been and changed, and it's like never born or it can't die. It is just how space is being attention. It is ever presence. It's the ever present mind. Once you realize that, you find this playful freedom. You find yourself staring from the unknown at your knowledge. You become not something else. You pay attention to yourself, and it's like your own intelligence, like a lotus, activates. But you have to be sincere. You have to value honesty more than cruel ambitions. So thanks for tuning in, guys. There's this topic is an endless topic. That means I have kind of really paid attention to it, and it caused me like a symptom. A symptom of eternal vision is endless streams of it's like when somebody suddenly discovers they have a talent, and their talent originates out of a super way they're being serious with their own conduct, as if you are not just an expert in how you hold technology in your hands, but also how you are holding your whole being in your attention, and how the presence of the moment has an attributeless divinity to it. As if you seek truth, then it becomes an illusion. It becomes an illusion, but then you recognize that the hand that was reaching for it is the truth. The origin of the attention is where the clarity can be found. Where else could it be? You have to find your source. Your source is not some like idea of like, you got to give some fruity story to it. Your source is your greatest question. You got to find your greatest question, and you have to be fearless, because that question is your greatest question. Because how would I say it? It's like you are seeing the value of what you can see. That means we can say we are travelers through sight, but we cannot just be defined by the sight of one moment. We are moving. We are sort of a wind of attention in manifestation, moving through manifestation. And it's very fascinating because it will eventually become non-conceptual, and I'm kind of finding an easy way somehow in this lifetime to share these ideas. It's like, what can I tell you? The more you look at something, the more its secret is revealed. It has to do with an authentic concentration on your own truth. And then you will suddenly see excuse my language, but the bullshit fade. You begin to see the illusions crumble. And you will be left no longer in a world where your conditions are out of falsehood, out of subconscious falsehood, which you never cared to realign. You have to constantly align your conscious mind. Your conscious mind is like the moment your eyes open and you're awake, you're a sculptor of an attention that the world awaits for. The world is waiting for. You see, we if we didn't belong here, we wouldn't be here. That's the easiest way of seeing where you belong. But it's like how much you honor yourself. World doesn't even acknowledge honor, so their honor becomes just to themselves. They live as a strong, honorable person, like samurai style, mindset. And like, with the mindset of a samurai, they slash away at the challenges that life throws at them, but eventually they will come into this recognition that you cannot. It's like loneliness makes us not want to hold on to our truths too long. Do you see? The emotional satisfaction we gain from social situations surpasses always the conceptual. This is the only way parties become fun, believe it or not. It's not an intellectual, it's not a linear process. It is an environment that is trying to step out of linearity. And this is why I find there's a lot of substance use, the modern generation wants to be dangerous, yet its dangers come at a cost of what it chose when it could have chosen something else. That's pretty much it. If you choose to regret, do you know how much regret your mind will generate? Do you know how many moments you've been alive in this life? If you regret something, like, imagine like you could infinitely have regret, but there's no point of that. There's no point of having a thought like Bertrand Russell says. You should have thoughts that are only rational. I don't per se agree just with that, because I feel that rationality is based on how much irrationality reshapes it, and rationality reshapes irrationality. It's a relationship between the known and the unknown. But it's kind of like an exploration of a landscape of intelligent phenomena that only you can see behind your eyes. It is your discovery of the logos, your realignment with, in some sense, the heartbeat of the universal sector. That means you understand what is valuable, and then the world guides you. You know, we're creatures that not only just want to do things and make things happen. We want things to happen to us also. And what that means is our intelligence is like a receiver and an expressor at the same time. We want to receive data from a source that is not us. At the same time, we want to express data. You know, do you see? And so it's very fascinating, because language for me, it's like a blend. Like, this is when somebody speaks, for me, it's like the way the words are chronologically coming out of the silence has a sort of profoundness similar to dancers starting to dance in unique ways. And the mind is like the painter. It is how image accelerates and various images can be instantly recognized. It's a kind of remembrance out of anything anybody has ever told you. It's kind of seeing the mirror of existence. I said it in one talk. The mirror of existence, the most profound concept that I came across, the concept of the reflection. Whenever I looked at first time I thought of the idea of simulation was when I looked in the mirror, believe it or not. I'm like, that's not me in the mirror. Simulation, the idea of the whole simulation theory on Tuesday. master your attention, then whatever your attention goes on will you will see it. You will see it clearly. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Okay. Henry David Thoreau says it's not what you're looking at that matters, it's what you see. It's like um, the opposite of nostalgia. It's like you smile as the greatness you've always been. One of those kind of realignments with your, let's say, true nature of being. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Much blessings and namaste.